Hi, Audrey.
Hello, how are you doing, Andy?
I'm doing as well as possible, thank you. I hope you're
Good,
doing well as well.
indeed.
Can we start with you introducing yourself, please?
Right, hello, I'm Audrey Ludwig. I'm Director of Suffolk Law Centre, which is a fairly new charity we set up in 2018. It was an idea which we conceived as part of Ipswich and Suffolk Council for Racial Equality, which is our parent charity. Basically, we are a legal charity giving advice, representation in a whole range of different legal subjects to people throughout Suffolk and in some cases into Norfolk.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And thanks for agreeing to this interview.
No
I
problem
know
at
how
all.
busy you are. I've got 4 questions for you. And the
Yeah.
first one is one I ask everyone, which is how are you looking after yourself during this pandemic and how are you supporting your team?
Right. The answer to looking after myself is probably as normal, not terribly well. I suffer from a number of disabilities, and I'm probably not as good at looking after my health as I should be. So I can't say that I've improved the bad habits I had before lockdown. I'm severe asthmatic, so I did lockdown very early, and I've largely kept away from other people. So I've spent a lot of time in my little back bedroom, um, and in terms of my staff, everybody's kept well. We've kept a lot of communication going, so luckily nobody's got COVID. I think that we're very focused on trying to ensure good mental health because the work we do is quite stressful and the volume is significant and increasing. So, it's something that we've thought about a lot. I can't say that I'm a particularly good role model for anybody. So I think, I've done what I needed to do. I live on adrenaline, coffee, and I do take my inhalers very regularly. So I'm not absolutely dreadful, but as I say, I can't say that I'm anybody's role model for good health.
I guess you're saying that you were shielding yourself because of your health
Yeah.
conditions, but in a way, whilst that clearly has its challenges, it meant you could still carry on with your work, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's been something that we've been very proud of, that we haven't closed, whilst we've physically closed the doors of the law centre, we've stayed open and available to clients throughout the whole period. We've been giving advice. If anything, the volume of advice has increased as people have come to us, particularly with employment issues, neighbour disputes, family issues. That's increased significantly. It's just that the nature of the advice giving has changed. We've taken some benefits of it in that I've actually recruited some new volunteers nationally to give remote advice. But we've just done what we could in the time we've had available.
Thank you. My next question is this. So, where and who have you turned to for support during this pandemic personally and for your organisation too?
Right. Okay. Internally, particularly our senior management team, we've got a fairly new structure where we'd actually um, um, brought in, not brought in, but promoted some people internally to develop a senior management structure not long before the pandemic struck. And I've been really pleased that there's been that additional senior management team. We've gone to having weekly meetings, whereas previously we were having monthly meetings, and that's been really vital. We've also part of something called the Law Centres Network, which is a national network, and we've had a manager's peer support meeting weekly through Zoom, and that's been invaluable to understand what's going on in terms of government thinking, funding, in terms of just knowing what other organisations like ours are doing, and just getting a sense of what's good practice, what doesn't work, has been really useful. So they've just been hugely supportive to me, the other managers. I co-manage ISCRI and Suffolk Law Centre with Famwell, and he is a rock. He's very calm. I been working with him for many years now, since about 2012, and I can't imagine life without him. So, you know, he's been hugely valuable. Even just knowing that he's there, even if I don't speak to him, is really helpful. We've increased staff meetings, and I think, again, and water cooler moments. We've got tea breaks. We've got all kinds of things which we do remotely to get the sort of office kitchen chatter replicated, but virtually. And I think, again, that's been a huge comfort to me, because it's quite lonely in my room. Whilst I do a lot of meetings, it's very formal, and I enjoy the informality of my colleagues, and that's been very supportive.
I like that water cooler moments reference. That's very good, and I agree with you about Fanwell. And I didn't know that you had the national network to look to for support and to connect with. That's really important. Thanks, Audrey. My third question is, and this could have been a question for everyone: how prepared were you for such a crisis, both for the short term and in the medium term?
I think yes and no. In some ways, yes. Some of it was fortuitous, like we happened to, because we do a lot of outreach, most of us have got laptops rather than desktop computers, so we were more mobile. And we'd also, because we'd had a really problematic system with the computers, we'd had to do quite a lot of work on our computer systems to improve them. And whilst it's not brilliant still, it's better than it was. In terms of also, we're quite a new organisation, and therefore, to a certain extent, we haven't got very complacent in our ways. Even ISCRI actually is constantly evolving to stay relevant and stay current, and I think the Law Centre is equally so. So I think we're quite agile organisations that are used to funding dips and ups and downs and staffing ups and downs and all the rest of it. It means that we're quite agile. We think on our feet. We act very quickly. It'd be interesting to see what we're like in a time of calm, because actually that would be an interesting challenge. But I think we've coped quite well in that regard. And I also have we did some training, both Fanwell and I, on practice management. And as part of that, crisis management was a component. And I remember having a conversation on the train with him about if there was a massive fire at the office, what would you do? There was an exercise in our training, and that in itself was very useful, because it meant that we'd already thought about a few of the issues about servers and staffing and where would we locate us, all of those sorts of things. On the other hand, I don't think you can prepare for something like this, and I think that understanding you can't prepare for it, and therefore allowing yourself the release of not blaming yourself for not being more prepared, is really important. You know, these new challenges are new challenges, and everybody's going to be a bit disconcerted, and there's a sense of you do something, and if it doesn't work, you do something else. So I think, you know, to a certain extent, I think there's a real risk of thinking you've got to be super prepared for everything, rather than just understanding that, you know, a lightning bolt is suddenly going to happen and you're going to have to respond. And the responding might just be to take a moment, have a cup of tea and reflect, rather than rush in and do something. One of the things that we try and do with regard to our business planning is understand that it's very difficult to plan when the world is very uncertain. So we adopt a model which is more of a strategy stream approach, which is a series of statements that we have to look at new opportunities or new problems through a series of, you know, how does this affect the organisation? Does it fit within our principles? Have we got the staff to do it? Can we afford to do it? You know, have we got the physical premises? Those sorts of questions, rather than identifying what precisely we're going to do if we have to. And I think that helps. We are used to everything being new, everything being different. And so I think that's it. I think that's where we're lucky, and probably more lucky than other people. I think the people who've probably had it hardest are those who've got a lot of staff who are used to doing the way that they've done things and are not used to change, because change is something that we got all the time.
It's the only constant, isn't it? So,
That's life, yes, change all the time.
no, that's a very good answer, Audrey, because
Okay.
there are degrees of preparedness because of the way you conduct yourselves as a business, because of the way you manage risk and your business continuity and so on. But ultimately, the size of this, nobody could have planned for. So you've had to react and adapt at the same time, haven't you?
But I think also mentally, it's to just not blame yourself for not predicting this was going to happen. And I think the difficulty for people who are very prepared, huge list makers, is when you have to scrumple up the list and throw it away.
Yeah.
That psychologically is quite problematic. And the point about it is, it was a moment where you just had to abandon your list and go back to first principles, and really think about the basics and what you're about, what your organization is for, how you compare it down to the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people probably struggled to cope with, the emotions involved in that. You know, it's easier to hide behind policy in a situation where policy doesn't work. That's quite hard. And having the confidence and giving your staff the confidence to make it up as they go along within certain principles is really important.
Yeah. Quite a very important point about mental health and your well-being and the way it impacts on us all. And in fact, going back to Fanuel, a name dropper that you brought in several times,
Yes.
he's come up with a quote which I really like and resonates, and he said that the pandemic has made novices out of experts overnight.
It's totally good point. It really is. And it it it, it very much tests your ability to understand what you're doing at a very core level, and think about the essence of what you're doing rather than the detail, because pairing it back to the essence is really important.
The wise. Thank you. Last question now, Audrey. And again, this is one I ask everyone. So looking forwards,
Yeah.
what do you think the learning will be, or the challenges as we come out of the outbreak?
I think the learning will be probably to remember this happened, and therefore when you're doing your planning, have a thought in your head that if the worst happened, how would you manage this new activity in a very agile way? So I think it's learning that everything needs to be capable of being agile, and that tying activity to heavy premises or very computer-based activities that can only be done in a certain way, or whatever it is a risk that needs to be managed. I think we'll learn something about social distancing. So possibly huge call center script-based services will give way to much more remote, sort of bespoke services. We need to, as all of us, recognise that charities aren't about continuing. The purpose of charities is not about keeping them in existence. It's about doing the work they were set up to do. And in practice, going back to the core essence of what an organisation is supposed to do and working out how you can deliver that in the context of where you're at the moment is really important. So I think in planning any activity, understanding that things aren't going to run smoothly forever and ever, something is going to be difficult, and you need to be able to create services that are flexible and adaptable, and also enable your staff to be a lot more inventive, creative, within the context of the core mission. Allow them discretion, so that they can come up with solutions to problems. I think a lot of things are very imposed top down, and I think that's really bad. One of the things that I love coming out of working in a race equality movement is about the idea that community is first. That you listen to the community and then you design services. You don't design services and then impose them on the community. So in practice, a lot of that learning should come out. Whether it does or not, I've got no idea. I mean, it's very easy for people to go back to the same old ways, but
Yes.
I think that would be a mistake. I think we've also learned that we don't have to all be stuck in an office all week. But on the other hand, the benefits of sitting in an office are the collegiate environment. So I don't want to lose that. And I think that that's something that we will dismiss at our peril. I don't think remote working aids the congeniality, the collaborative thinking. And I think even Zoom and all of those sorts of things don't give you that sort of office kitchen moments that we genuinely miss. So there's a few things. I suspect there's a load more. I mean, the load more is we're doing a shed load of fundraising at the moment to deal with crisis, and so churning out funding applications to stay going. I mean, one of the things I would say is that the loss of Suffolk Age UK is a reminder to us all that institutions are not permanent and that we constantly have to reinvent ourselves. But external agencies have also got to understand that they can't take organisations like Age UK for granted. And I think that's something that politicians in Suffolk have got to remember, is that they can't just assume that good long-standing charities will survive this, and they've got to resource them. So I think that's also an important message.
I took away outcomes focused, community-led, collegiate working, and then that very sobering end to that interview.
Sure.
Thank you, Audrey. That's a really, really good point to finish on. Thanks very much for your time.
You're very welcome. No, that was really good. Thank you.